Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Awesome Wholesaler Experience Podcast, where we look into the many facets of the job, the career, and the lifestyle of investment and insurance product wholesaling. I'm your host, the creator of the Awesome Wholesaler Experience, and yours truly, Awesome Mike. Hey, everyone, I have another terrific guest on the show today. Let's get right into it, and let me tell you about Mr. Bob Burg. Now, for 30 years and counting, Bob has helped companies, sales leaders, and their teams to more effectively communicate their value, sell at higher prices with less resistance, and to grow their business through referrals. Now, Bob is the author of many books on sales, marketing, and influence. And in fact, his total book sales are approaching 2 million copies. It's pretty awesome, Bob. Now, the American Management Association named Bob one of the most 30 influential leaders, and he was also named the top 200 most influential leaders in the world by Richtopia. Now, although for years, Bob was best known for his book, Endless Referrals, over the past few years, and actually several now, it's been his business parable, The Go-Giver, my favorite, by the way, which he co-authored with John David Mann. And that book there, The Go-Giver and the Go-Giver concept has really captured the imagination, the hearts and minds of his followers even today. Now, Bob is an advocate, supporter, and defender, love that, of the free market, free enterprise system, believing that the amount of money one makes is directly proportional to how many people they serve. Finally, Bob regularly addresses audiences ranging from 50 to 16,000, sharing the platform of such notables, today's top thought leaders, broadcast personalities, Olympic athletes, and even former United States presidents. And last year, Bob was given a great honor. He was inducted into the National Speakers Association Hall of Fame. Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
But today, Bob, you've finally done it. You've reached the summit by being our guest here on the Awesome Wholesaler.
That's how I feel about
podcast. Clearly. Hey, Bob, welcome to the show. How are you today?
Thanks, Mike. Great to be with you.
Yeah, I appreciate it very much. Now, in fact, in the pre-call, you kind of mentioned you're talking to maybe somebody who's more important than all of the accolades you have, and that's your little furry one there. I know that you're an unapologetic animal fanatic. Tell us about that. What's the affinity with the animals, and why is that a calling or a heartstring of yours?
Yeah, I always grew up with animals, mostly dogs, and we usually had 2 or 3 at a time. Love all animals, but I just probably have more of an affinity with dogs, just their sense of loyalty and devotion, and just their, but I have my little Calvin is a cat, and he's a rescue from the local animal shelter. But I've just always felt that animals just loving and kind, and they don't cause anybody any harm, and at least not unless they're trained to. I always say there are no bad animals, only bad humans that train animals to do bad things. But animals themselves are just kind, loving, amazing, and they act very congruently with their nature, and I just really love them.
Yeah, they're very consistent, usually unconditionally. I think we can learn a lot from them. So I appreciate you being a defender of them. I have 2 Wheaton Terriers myself, and they are just, they're
fantastic.
They're better. I don't say they're better than kids, but sometimes they are to where they can, provide a lot of value. So I look, I do my research and following you a bit for years, actually. And for 30 years, you've kind of had this platform to where you've been this iconic public speaker, author, presenter. But can you tell us how did that come to be? How did you start out? Were you were you brought up in that environment to become some kind of an inspiration to others, or tell us about your background a little bit?
Well, I have 2 great parents, and they were an inspiration to me and an inspiration to others, especially my dad, who was sort of like, I'm like him in that more the public personality. And while his was locally based, he just was able to really bring a lot of value to a lot of people through his business. And my mom was always right there, and she ran the business end of it. And so I had a great example in terms of that. Growing up, I wanted to be third baseman for the Boston Red Sox, but a little thing called lack of talent got in the way there. But I also wanted to be in radio and television, and that I did start out in. I began as a sportscaster in radio, and then I was a late night news guy for a very, very small ABC affiliate in the Midwestern United States. I wasn't particularly good at that, and it wasn't long until I like to say I graduated into sales. The challenge, though, was I had had no sales training and didn't know anything about sales on a formal level. And so really, and the training at the company was, we'll say, negligible at best. It was
At
really
most,
non-existent.
like most.
And yeah, and so I floundered for the first few months, and then I was in a bookstore one day. This is, again, 40 years ago, and came across a couple of books. One was by Tom Hopkins, and the other was by Zig Ziglar. And I got those books, and I began studying them, devouring them, practicing. I'd stay up late into the night and just practicing and rehearsing and doing everything, just learning as much as I could. Well, the interesting thing was, in a few weeks, my sales began to really take off, and it was night and day. And what was good about that is I realized there was a system, a methodology to doing this. To this day, I personally define a system as the process of predictably achieving a goal based on a logical and specific set of how-to principles. In other words, if it's been proven that by doing A, you'll get the desired result of B, then all you need to do is A, and continue to do A, and continue to do A, and you'll eventually get the desired results of B. And so that was very helpful and provided me with a lot more confidence. I began really studying everything I could on sales. But really, the good part was in coming to understand that in studying sales, you really had to work on yourself. And I began getting and devouring the books that you and I have both read. All your listeners and viewers have read, the books like How to Win Friends and Influence People by Carnegie, and Think and Grow Rich by Hill, and Magic of Thinking Big by Schwartz, and Psycho-Cybernetics by Maltz, and all the classics that really help build you on the inside, and then which results in that success manifesting on the outside. And just I love the whole part of it. Eventually began, I was sales manager of a company, began teaching other people outside the company what was working for me. And as I said, as they used to say on Seinfeld, yada, yada, yada. And here I am. But began speaking professionally, writing books and so forth.
It's very interesting because you bring up the word system, and we're going to dig into the Go Giver platform a little bit here. But one of the biggest components of the platform is basically faith and trust that in the laws of reciprocation and the laws of providing value. And isn't it a little bit of a dichotomy? Like, isn't a little bit of a there's some ambiguity to it, to the Go Giver model that is a dichotomy from the word system?
No, I don't think so. I mean, when you think about it, the basic premise of the Go Giver, and I think you have Go Givers Sell More. The original one was the Go Giver, which is a business parable, and really the premise, if you will, of that of all the Go Giver, all the books in the series, but of the original one especially, is that shifting your focus, okay, from getting to giving. And when we say giving in this context, Mike, we simply mean constantly and consistently providing immense value to others, understanding that doing so is not only a more pleasant way of conducting business, it's the most financially profitable way of all. But not because of some, woo-woo out there, oh, just do good things and have faith that good things will come back. No, absolutely not at all. When you think about it, it actually makes very logical, very rational sense, because when you're that salesperson or entrepreneur who can move off of focusing on ourselves, and instead focus on that other person, bringing value to others, making that person's life better, solving their problems, people feel good about you. They want to get to know you. They like you. They trust you. They want to be a part of your life, your business. They will most likely want to introduce you to others, want to bring value or give value to you. And everyone comes away a winner. I often, when I speak at a sales conference, one of the first things I'll say, and I don't say this dogmatically, but just in a kind of a joking way, but I'll say, nobody's going to buy from you because you have a quota to meet. right? They're not going to buy from you because you need the money or because you're a really nice person who believes in what you do. They're going to buy from you only because ultimately they believe they'll be better off by doing so than by not doing so. And that's the only reason why anyone should buy from anyone else. The good thing is that makes it so the salesperson knows that if they want this sale to take place, their focus is going to have to be on bringing immense value to another human being. So to the degree that you're able to communicate that value in such a way that that other person understands it and feels they will, right? That's the degree they're going to do business with you. So I don't see it as being, you know, faith, or I mean, it's faith that natural law works, right? I mean, it's faith that human nature is human nature, but I don't think it takes a lot of faith. It's more just understanding that that has proven to be the correct way so often.
Yeah, I love it. In fact, if you can, I want to get into the five. You call them the five laws of stratospheric success. I like the visual there, right? And value is the first one. And on my travels, a lot of wholesalers, financial advisors, they're always taught to add value, to bring value. And can you tell us about what real value is? And isn't it in the? It's kind of like beauty. Value is also in the eye of the beholder, not
It's
necessarily in the provider.
uh, you're right on. Absolutely. I mean, the first law that we talk about, as you said, the law of value says your true worth is determined by how much more you give in value than you take in payment. Now, when you first hear that, it might sound rather counterintuitive. Give more in value than I take in payment. I mean, that sounds all nicey nice and everything, but I mean, isn't that a recipe for bankruptcy? Give more in value than you take in payment. So we simply have to understand the difference between price and value. Price is a dollar figure. It's a dollar amount. It's finite. It is what it is, right?
Right.
Value, on the other hand, is the relative worth or desirability of a thing, of something, to the end user or beholder. In other words, what is it about this thing, this product, service, concept, idea, what have you, that brings so much worth to someone that they will willingly exchange their money or time or energy, what have you, for this, and be ecstatic that they did, while you make a very healthy profit. I would, if we can use an example outside of the wholesale aspect or even outside of the retail aspect, let's use another, let's say an accountant you hire to do your taxes. And this accountant charges you $1,000. That's his price, or it's his fee, but literally his price, $1,000.
Okay.
But what's the value he provides you? Well, just on an intrinsic level, okay, he saves you $5,000 in taxes. He saves you countless hours of time from doing it yourself, and provides you and your family with the peace of mind and the security of knowing it was done correctly. So what he did is he gave you well over $5,000 in value in exchange for $1,000 price or fee. So not only, you feel great about it, right? But he also made a very healthy profit, because to him, it's well worth it to him to trade his time and effort and energy and knowledge and wisdom for that $1,000. So in any free market-based exchange, and when we say free market, we simply mean no one is forced to do business with anyone else. People do business with one another on their own volition. In any free market-based exchange, there are always two profits: the buyer profits and the seller profits, because each came away better off afterwards than they were before, which is why a free market capitalistic system, and again, not to be confused with cronyism, where the legislators are bought and sold through the through the K Street lobbyists who are representing their clients who want special favors, and that's different. That's not free market. That's cronyism. That's different. But in a free market, and I guarantee you, everyone watching this, we operate in a free market, and that no one's forced to buy from us. So, in that free market exchange, that's what builds an economy. That's why free market capitalism works so well in creating massive abundance, or I should say abundance for the masses. Okay. Because it builds. It's 1 + 1 = 3. It's not I win, you lose, I win. No, it's we both win because there's an exchange of value, but it's up to the salesperson to be the one to effectively communicate it. And that's where what you said is so perfect. Value is in the eyes of the beholder. It's not what we think is of value about what we do. It's not what we think they should think. It's what they feel, what they believe is of value. And that's why we say that money is simply an echo of value, right? The value comes first. The money you receive is simply a very natural result of the value you've provided.
Love it. Love it. In fact, that leads us into the second law, which is the law of compensation.
Mm-hmm.
And
And this,
it's very, you have a great array of points on it. And the one point I want to ask you about, which you kind of just alluded to it, is this call it the skills that you need. So the better that a salesperson, wholesaler, accountant, whatever that is in delivering the value and using the right language to communicate, that's going to increase their compensation based on the law of compensation.
yeah, and the more people whose lives you bring that exceptional value to, the more money with which you'll, be rewarded. And that's really, the law of compensation says your income is determined by how many people you serve, as well as how well you serve them. So, our law number one says give more in value than you take in payment. Law number two says that the more people whose lives, let's put it this way, and Nicole Martin in the story, in the original Go Giver book, in the parable, she told Joe, the protege, that law number one, the law of value, as important as it is, it's the foundational principle that represents your potential income.
Right.
But it's not enough to just provide this exceptional value to one person. Law number two represents your actual income because it's about the impact you make on the lives of many people. And of course, one of the best ways to do this is through referrals, and introductions, which has several great advantages to it. Referred prospects are easier to set the appointment with. Price is less of an issue because you're going in on borrowed influence. Benefit number three is it's easier to complete the transaction or close the sale based on borrowed trust, or what I like to call vicarious experience, right? They may not have done business with you themselves personally, but someone who they know, like, and trust has said, this is the person who you want to do business with. This is the person who will take care of you. This is the person, right? And the fourth benefit of a referred prospect is they're already of the mindset that that's how you do business. So in their world, they see you as a referral-based professional, and they're much more, because that's how they met you. So they're much more likely to refer you to others. So when you combine, laws one and two, you're talking about exceptional value plus significant reach. And that's what equals very high compensation.
Now that sounds like an art. In fact, as you're saying that, I'm thinking about it. There have been years where I've had a selling relationship, or I've gotten sales from 400 different advisors, and then there's been other years, but they were shallow. It wasn't a lot. The bell curve still applies. And then there's been other years where I only had selling relationships with 200 selling advisors, but the ticket sizes were much larger.
Mhm.
And I found that it was an art, trying to balance how much time, effort, and value that I could provide, along with how wide I could cast the net. Do you have any tips on
Sure.
how to determine what is the right measurement of depth and breadth of the value?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's really um, a function, if you will, of where you see your business and who you want to be working with. And, someone who's, on the retail side, obviously someone who works with high net, investors isn't going to have as many, and they're not going to want to, right? Where so I think it really, is a matter of what anyone's looking for within their own business. And that's where, to me, having, a coach or mentor or someone, and it could be informal, it could be just someone who's a colleague who you were, who's more experienced than you, or someone, whether or whomever. But that's where I really think that, uh, having that kind of mentorship or coaching or whatever, comes in handy because it's easier for someone who's been there already to kind of help you along.
Law three is the law of influence, Bob. And for 30 years, you've been in this business. So you have experienced, maybe you've actually created, like, you've done presentations before there was a cell phone, when they had the phones on the street with the wire that you had to pull up in your car. Yeah, payphone, right? They're in the Smithsonian now, to where now today, literally, we're going to be broadcasting this to thousands, potentially hundreds of millions of people. LinkedIn is really huge nowadays. So one of the concepts is to build a network. And in the book, they talk about, this iconic number of 250 people. Have you seen that change with the influx of the internet and social media, or is building the network, is it different now than it was 15 years ago?
So there's a couple really good questions there, Mike. The first one is about, the size of it. And it's in Joe Girard, who wrote the book, How to Sell Anything to Anyone. I think that was the book, it was a classic way back. He was at one time the world's leading record-setting Guinness Book of World Records car salesperson, who, by the way, was just surpassed a couple of years ago by Ali Rita in Michigan. But Joe had the record for many, 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 many years, and unfortunately, he just passed away. But Joe's thing, he was the one who kind of came up with that 250 person, sphere of influence most people naturally have. And he was on Twitter for a while before he passed, and we went back and forth on Twitter a couple of times, and I told him how much I enjoyed his work, and about the 250, how many times I've quoted him, and he said, now with social media, he said it's more than that. But we kind of went back and forth and agreed that, like anything else, it's still, not just you can have 100,000 connections or 2,000 or something on Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn. That doesn't mean they're, but what social media does is it does allow us to connect with people we otherwise may not have had the opportunity to connect with, and build a relationship and drive it deep. And you can do that on social media. But it always goes back to, when we talk about, and in my first book, Endless Referrals, it was sort of the premise of that book, and it's still in the Go Giver books too, where I'd say all things being equal, people will do business with and refer business to those people they know, like, and trust. It's not those computers they know, like, and trust. So it's always about developing relationships with people, and you should still be out there in person. There's no question, but you can also utilize social media as it's appropriate, and you can do that in an inbound way and in an outbound way. You shouldn't depend on it, and I discourage people, unless their business is just social media, based or technology, it is to be doing it always. It's not one or the other, right? It's both. But I do believe that it is greater now than 250, but it still always comes back to how deep are you driving that relationship? Does that person know you, like you, trust you? Do they want to see you succeed? Do they want to be a part of your business if that's appropriate? But if they're not in the business that would be part of yours, obviously, can they recommend you to others? Would they willingly do that? Will they be your personal walking ambassador? And it comes down to, with the law of influence, and which says that your influence is determined by how abundantly you place other people's interests first. Now, when we say that, we don't mean in a way that you're a doormat or you're a martyr or you're self-sacrificial. Absolutely not at all. It's just understanding that the know, like, and trust is still the most important aspect. And there's no faster, more powerful, or faster way to develop those feelings toward you in others by genuinely moving from that I or me focus to that other focus, looking for ways to, as Sam, one of the mentors in the story, advised Joe, make your win all about the other person's win. And when you develop that reputation for doing that, wow, that's when your network really begins to explode, because you become that go-to person.
I love it. And I have a detailed question for you here, or maybe
Sure.
it's just a specific question. So there's two schools of thought that I've come across. One is to use the words so that you can actually become charismatic and persuasive and connecting with whoever your guest might be, to ask the right questions so you can understand what's important to them and then deliver your value in that language. But I was recently kind of, shocked when a fellow said, "You know what, Mike, I don't have enough time for that. I'm out there and I'm going to serve the folks that are like me. I don't want to have to be phony or have to put on my blue hat because they like blue, or my red hat because they like red. I wear a red hat, and I want to surround myself with people that are like me. Is there a right or wrong way, or are those the two choices that you have to decide from?
Well, I think to say there's only two choices is sort of what we call the false dilemma, right? The unnecessary use of the word or. And when he says, when you say, should you discover what the other person needs and ask the question, and he says, well, no, I don't want to be phony. I don't think that's phony. What is selling? On a very, by definition, selling is discovering what the other person wants, needs, or desires and helping them to get it. And we do that through asking questions, discovering what they need, making sure we understand that. Then in the presentation, matching up the benefits of our product or service with what they want or need, and so forth. But what he's saying also isn't incorrect in terms of when he's saying, okay, I have a very specific niche that I'm serving. I'm basing it on me and what I like. And so I'm going to attract certain people very strongly through that. And a lot of people I'm going to repel, but that's okay because I'm interested in the ones who are like me. So I don't think he's wrong in any way. That's a way of doing it. But I think to say one or the other isn't, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do. I think it's and, right? I mean, it's
It's an
not
and,
one or
right?
the
It's
other,
an
it's one
and, not
and
an
the
or.
other.
Yeah.
Yeah. Another little tangent or a facet of this law of influence, what I really appreciate, you talk about your serve, and as a wholesaler, especially, when we're asked, "Hey, what do you do?" I'm a wholesaler. It doesn't work. So, do you have any tips that you can share with maybe wholesalers and or financial advisors on how to describe what they do, or how to answer that question and tee up their serve?
Well, yeah, and when we talked about serve, we were talking about the difference between the word, and this was in the Go Givers Sell More book. We were talking about the difference between a pitch and a serve. People who know me know that I just can't stand the word pitch in terms of a sales. To say a sales pitch to me, it's just it's
Disgusting.
disrespectful to because what is a pitch? Well, in baseball, a pitch is something you do to someone, not for someone. The idea of a pitch is to strike the batter out or cause harm, not harm by hitting them, but obviously by striking them out. A serve in tennis, and we're saying a friendly game of tennis, you're just going back and forth, right? It's and you can take that semantically and do a lot of things with it. So that's we're not too concerned with that. But what we're saying is rather than say pitch, how about presentation or share or something instead of a pitch. I would, and you can say,
Phenomenal.
well, but I only say pitch when I'm talking to someone in my office. I'm going to do my pitch today. I don't say it in front of the client. Yeah, I'm not. Yeah. It's hard. It's hard to do that. It's if we believe it's a pitch because we're using the word pitch, then it's a pitch. But again, we sometimes semantics are important, sometimes they're not. But I think in this case it kind of is because what we tell. It's not just what we tell others about what we do, it's what we tell ourselves about what we do. So, as far as we talk about a benefit statement as opposed to an elevator speech, if you will, instead of an elevator pitch, right? I think most, obviously the people who the wholesalers are want to connect with, they know, what a wholesaler is, but someone else who you're saying it to, I think instead of trying to worry about something really fancy, it's just more or less letting that person know who your clientele is. So it would be, we work with financial advisors, on helping them match beneficial products with their clients or something like that. And so I think it's that way. I don't think there's anything real fancy we have to particularly do. I think it's pretty much just putting that out there so that people who know, like, and trust you and who might know people in that field are able to connect you with them successfully.
I say that I'm a spokesman for an investment company, and then I can tailor it depending on who the audience is, whether it's that I provide that value to the financial advisors and the investment community. But definitely the wholesaler word is a weird one. As we're rounding third base here, the law of authenticity, kind of just teed that up as well. But it's a big one. And the idea to undersell. And here's my question about underselling. I know what it means. Everyone knows it means, deliver more than you promise. Don't promise the world. But isn't that a little bit disingenuous? I mean, shouldn't I say to them, hey, I'm going to provide you with A, and then, even according to the law of follow through, and provide them with A, so that they have clear expectations on what is going to be delivered? Isn't underselling and over delivering, even though it might seem like it might be pleasant, doesn't it plant a seed of, well, one, either they didn't know they were going to provide that extra value, or two, they didn't tell me. And neither one of those solutions is very appealing. It kind of leaves a little bit of maybe doubt in what the next thing I'm going to tell you that I'm going to provide. Am I going to overachieve, or maybe I'll come up short next time? What do you think about that?
Well, there's a couple things, and we don't talk about that specifically in the book in terms of, what we do say, don't go overboard in what you do. But, some people are going to promise exactly what they're going to deliver, and some people are going to underpromise. I don't think any, it's sort of like a like giving a presentation, and I speak at conferences all the time. No one ever complains about a speaker ending a little too short, but you don't want to overstay. Okay. And by the same token, I don't think any client ever gets offended when they receive even more value than what they're promised. But I think they could be offended by receiving less value than what they're promised.
Gotcha.
So I don't think it's less than authentic. I think it's how you frame it, and I think it's how you feel. Is it congruent with your values? Yeah, sure. You should be, by the way, communicating that they're going to receive a lot of value. Why wouldn't you? But I think when you can continue to do more and more and always go out of your way, it's those little things that you do that are unexpected. It's that, we talk about the elements of value being excellence, consistency, attention, empathy, and appreciation. It's those little things you do. It doesn't have to be anything big, but it's those little things that have people feel that you're on top of it. You care about them. You understand them. You're looking out for them. Those are all those things. And you probably don't say to a person, well, I'm going to, give you more empathy. I'm going to be the most empathetic guy you've ever seen, or the most this and that, or that. No, you do it, and you let that speak, and that's the over delivering. When you think about it. But you always, obviously, in terms of authenticity, you want to be congruent with your values.
Yeah, it's well said. Well said. In fact, so in the book, those four: value, compensation, influence, and authenticity. Those are the easy ones, you say. The fifth one's the hard one. And that's the law of receptivity.
Receptivity, yeah.
Yeah. And, there's a few points on it. One is to stay open. Two is how you view a crisis. And then the third one is trust. But can you teach us how to be able to receive the value if we're all about giving?
Mike, the law of receptivity is the one John David Mann, my awesome co-author of the book. I don't think I've mentioned John. He was the lead writer and storyteller. He's a writer. He's a great writer. I'm more of a how-to kind of, guy. But John and I have both agreed that we have received more emails from people saying that chapter, that law, gave me permission to finally allow myself to receive. Now, we take that as a compliment, but it's also sort of a sad commentary in that, the world around us gives us, and I won't say mixed messages about prosperity. The world around us gives us very negative messages about prosperity. And from the time people are very young, through a combination of upbringing, environment, schooling, news media, television shows, movies, all you see is poor people are good and kind and humble and nice and honest, and rich people are mean and nasty and cowardly. Right? Oh, come on. It's a big world. There's lots of people out there who do bad things, but it's just such it's just one of those things. It's so wrong. And but it gets into a person's head when it's something that you hear from the time you're a little kid, and or somebody says when you're younger, if you've ever been asked the question, hey, when you get older, do you want to be wealthy or happy? Talk about a false dilemma, right?
It's a curveball for sure.
Right. Of course, the answer is yes, both wealthy and happy. But you don't hear that. So people who have provided massive value to others and have created the context, what we call the benevolent context for your success, and now they start to really receive. But the old tapes, actually that might be the old audios in the head. I don't think tapes anymore,
With the tape,
but,
Bob.
right, with the tape. But those old, in the head, if you're making money, you must have done something wrong, you're evil, right? Well, consciously we know that's not so, But unconsciously, that can really get in people's way and cause you to sabotage yourself and sabotage your success. So what we say is that, when you talk about receptivity, it's nothing more than understanding that as human beings, we breathe out, but we also breathe in. We breathe out carbon dioxide, we breathe in oxygen. You breathe out, which is giving, we breathe in, which is receiving. So unlike the messages from the world around us, giving and receiving are not opposite concepts. That's important. They're two sides of the very same coin, and they work in tandem. Now, what we know is, of course, the natural universal laws is the giving comes first. Your focus is on giving or providing immense value to others. Absolutely. But this sets in motion everything else, including the receiving. And then you've got to allow yourself to receive in like measure. And when you do, you will receive. You'll receive in abundance. You'll receive an abundance. So, it's not just about giving, it's about giving, and it's about allowing yourself to receive as well, which again allows you to give more and allows you to receive more and give more and receive more. And just like the laws of free markets, it builds a bigger pie for everyone as that happens.
I love it. And kind of I guess a different tangent type of a question, but I've heard, and it's even in a hip hop song, that the I guess the true way to give is anonymous to anonymous, because otherwise there's this, even if it's microscopic, there's this little bit of, I did this, or trying to establish, not necessarily that that's a major thing, but if someone knows that if they're able to see that you did this, then they're going to, try to give it. So real giving, isn't it anonymous to anonymous, or is that kind of way out
Well,
there?
in terms of charity, sure, that's great. In terms of charity, the highest form of giving is when neither the receiver or the giver knows. By the way, I know they say that in hip hop. That actually is Talmudic wisdom from thousands of years ago too. But yeah, the natural form. Then the second highest form is when I think the receiver doesn't know and the giver does. The third is when the giver, and it's all until and all forms of giving when it comes to charity, it's fine. But yeah, the highest form of giving in terms of charity is when neither receiver nor the giver knows who gave or who received. But that's something different. That's charity, and we're big believers in charity. But that's not what we're talking about when we talk about doing business the go-giver way. We're talking about providing value, giving value to others. You're doing this as a way. You are building your business. Now, the question then is it less than righteous to give value, knowing that, that you certainly would like to see something good come out of it? So there's a couple things here. One is, as human beings, we are self-interested creatures. It's human nature, and it's good because it's what allowed us to survive from the cave person days and make other human beings another human being, right? So it's not a matter of denying our self-interest. To do that would be kind of not acknowledging the truth, right? And I think successful people deal in truths, not necessarily what they would like in a utopian type, right? So no, it's not a matter of denying one's self-interest, but it is a matter of temporarily suspending that self-interest and putting it aside. Why? For two reasons. One is, that as a good person, as a salesperson, it is about the other person. It's not about you. So you should always have their interests first. But it's also good business. Remember what we talked about earlier. They're not buying for you. They're not buying for your sake. They're buying for their sake. So the most self-interested thing you can do is to set your self-interest aside and be other interested and other focused. And so, it's not, but isn't it, don't I want good things to happen? Of course you do. But what we do is we do everything without attachment to that result. When you're providing value to others, whether it's indirectly or you're giving your presentation to someone, do you prefer to get the business? Of course you do. Why wouldn't you? We're in business, but we're not attached to our sense of happiness and peace of mind isn't put in danger if that doesn't happen. So, all these things, they're things to work on, and they're not always natural. They're not always intuitive, but that's why not everybody's as successful as they might want to be. So, it's
That's deep. That's deep.
it's
Appreciate
the
that.
world.
Hey, I want to ask you one of my signature questions, and then we'll close out here. I appreciate you
Sure.
being on.
My
So
pleasure.
if your phone rang and you picked it up, and on the other end of the line was 30-year-old Bob Burg, what would you tell him? And you had a couple minutes. What advice would you give to your 30-year-old self?
Well, I would say this. Can I go back to my maybe 20-year-old self?
Sure.
Because that's a little different from the 30-year-old. Because the 20-year-old self, I'd have said, young Bob Burg, shut up and listen more and stop thinking you know how the world works, because you don't, my friend. You think you know, but most of what you're totally sure is true ain't. Okay, now the 30-year-old, I'd say, you're starting to learn. You're not where you want to be yet, but keep going.
That's good.
Because you're getting closer.
That's very good. Very good. Last question, and then we'll wrap. Bob, if I was a genie and I could give you any legitimate superpower, which one would you choose, and what would you do with it?
I think I would like to be able to know what everybody is thinking. I'm such a student of human nature. Yet I understand that I don't understand people. Even though I think I do, I know I don't. And that's why, I find myself a lot of times thinking, what is that person? What could that person possibly be thinking? And I'd like to know. I would like to know. Now, as far as what I do with it, I don't know if that turns into necessarily business or whatever. I guess it probably does if you know what someone's thinking, but I'm not even thinking about it for that reason. I'm more or less thinking just because I have this insatiable curiosity to understand how people think, and knowing that, that unless you know what is in someone else's mind, you really don't know.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Stay curious. Hey, I appreciate you being on the show today. Thanks very much for your time.
Thanks
And
for having me.
yeah, and Bob, thanks for the many years of your work. I'm sure I can say thank you on behalf of the millions of people that have a fan of your
Thank you.
books and your work, and even your podcast. So I definitely encourage folks to plug into your podcast and have a listen. It's the Go Giver podcast, and I'm sure you can find it everywhere that's out there. We do say here on the Awesome Wholesaler Experience podcast that it's about the journey. And Bob, I wish you well on yours. Do look forward to talking with you again soon.
Mike, thank you. You're fantastic. I really appreciate you.
God, I appreciate that. And a huge thank you to everyone for tuning in today. And if you haven't already done so, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Appreciate your support and with the show. And as always, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for supporting the show. And of course, thanks for being awesome. Night, everybody.